Hey everyone. Here at the GOP just turned on itself. House Republicans erupted after discovering that their own Senate colleagues had quietly slipped a $500,000 payout clause into the funding bill, all while millions of Americans were still blocked from SNAP benefits. The House Rules Committee met Tuesday night trying to clear up the mess before Wednesday's vote. The Senate claimed victory for ending the shutdown, but inside the GOP, it looked more like a family feud than governance.
On this committee earlier about this provision, that they will undoubtedly support this provision, support this bill, and do nothing to address it. And I welcome them to come back into the room. I know they're back there if they'd like to perhaps challenge that proposition. So given that, I want to make sure the record is crystal clear because, as you know, the legislative history and the intent behind this particular provision, I suspect, will become the subject of whatever future litigation unfolds as a result of this provision. I think this provision is plainly unconstitutional. Ranking Member Raskin, I am sure you are very familiar with the 27th Amendment. How does this not violate the framers' proposition embedded in the 27th Amendment that precludes the very kind of corrupt sort of self-dealing that this legislation provides for, right? As you know, we're not allowed to, members of Congress, the Congress as an institution cannot increase the salary of members of Congress, senators or members of the House, before an intervening election. And this provision clearly, I assume, is an attempt to subvert that, if not the plain text of the 27th Amendment, at least the spirit of it.
Yeah, I mean, my first instinct when I read this was if they want to vote a pay raise for themselves and for other members of Congress, they should put it on the table and we should move it forward. But this is a hell of a way to do it. But I'll tell you, the 27th Amendment is parallel to a number of other provisions in the Constitution. We've talked a lot about the Foreign Government Emoluments Clause. The Domestic Emoluments Clause in Article 1, Section 9 says that the salary of the president shall be fixed. It shall not be increased by $1 by him deriving other revenue from the federal government or state governments, and it shall not be decreased either. That's the president's salary, and the 27th Amendment adopts very much that same approach to our salaries, which we should not be increasing our own salaries, even if it's for a tiny subset of the overall Congress. So I would say between that and the Equal Protection Clause, this thing's a constitutional loser. I mean, the Equal Protection Clause, you know, there is strict scrutiny and heightened scrutiny when you're discriminating on the basis of race and gender and so on, but every law has to pass some minimal rational basis scrutiny. There's got to be some rational end and means adopted to it that makes sense. What is the rational end of giving 100 people a right not to be subpoenaed by a grand jury that the rest of the population doesn't have?
What the Democrats said here hit exactly where it hurts, and they weren't exaggerating. Calling this out as corruption in broad daylight isn't political theater. It's just the plain truth. 8 Republican senators slipped in a clause that could line their own pockets with taxpayer money and then tried to act like it's just another day in Washington because, let's be honest, it is just another day in Washington when they do that. And the Democrats, at least for once, didn't let it slide. They laid it out clearly. This isn't policy, this is self-deating.
This $1 million jackpot provision is one of the most blatantly corrupt provisions for political self-dealing and plunder of public resources ever proposed in the United States Congress. And we're watching it happen in real time. You know, it was said that the Roman Senate was so corrupt, so drenched in bribery and private self-enrichment that the senators were actually as corrupt as Julius Caesar and as Caligula, the tyrannical maniac. I don't know if the Republicans in the Senate today are as corrupt as Donald Trump, but they're on the path.
Representative Jamie Raskin nailed it when he said that it violates the Constitution's very idea that no one should be a judge in their own case. People are tired of the excuses of lawmakers pretending that their hands are tied while they can't actually help any real Americans, and they protect each other's interests, but not the interests of their constituents. The contrast couldn't be sharper. Democrats are talking about health care, about fairness, about accountability, while Republicans fight to defend a payout that they wrote for themselves. And they don't care about health care or justice or accountability. They just want to remove social programs. And Democrats are not the best at keeping them in place either.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one amendment. That's Amendment 23. This is the Republican payola that we've been talking about. And it's basically to strike this provision out of the bill. And this provision would simply allow so just to take a step back, because we've been talking about it here, but people may be joining in. But basically, Republicans in the Senate put this provision in, 8 or 9 of them, of the Senate Republicans would be given a legal pathway to force taxpayers to pay them millions of dollars over phone record collections during the January 6th investigations. It's a rewards program for Republican senators. And I would walk you through it, but the Republicans on this committee seem to know it well and have walked us through it quite well. It's $500,000 at a minimum per phone line, per offense. This could go up to $50 million per Republican senator, if you think about it. And it limits the government's ability to defend itself and defend these claims on behalf of the taxpayers. And so you're basically having these Republican senators being able to make these legal claims, and then the government can't even defend itself. It's just going to be rewarding these senators with cash, 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 cash. How is that not corrupt? And this is in the middle of an affordability crisis. $50 million, that's 1,000 times the average annual salary of a person in this country. Think about that. 1,000 times the average annual salary. Forget Democrat versus Republican. This completely undermines this entire institution and everything about it. This is why people hate Congress, is because they think we're all corrupt because stuff like this happens. And I've heard Republicans on this committee say that they agree that it's wrong. They agree that this is a wrong thing and that we'll fix it later. Well, you have the chance to fix it right now, and this is really the only chance to fix it right now. Because the reality is, the only way to right this wrong is to strip this bill of this amendment right now and send it back to the Senate and force them to vote on the bill without this provision. Because if you make them do it later on, they're never going to strip this amendment. They're not going to unenrich themselves. That's never going to happen. So this is our only chance to right this wrong. And this is corruption. It is theft and broad daylight, and anyone voting against this amendment to strip this bill, this corrupt provision, is complicit in that corruption. So I urge you to support Amendment 23 and not aid and abet corruption.
So that moment summed up everything wrong with Congress. Democrats were saying at least somewhat what needed to be said. Like, if you admit that this clause is corrupt, then fix it now, not later. What? What do you mean? Because no one who just gave themselves a payout is going to undo it later. It's like, oh, I'll get to it later. I'll remember it later. I'll totally fix it. Calling it theft in broad daylight was spot on. That's just exactly what it is. Another Democrat, Senator Chris Murphy, tweeted, "This is outrageous. Another reason the CR should not pass. It creates a new offense tailored perfectly to allow Trump to write a government check of millions of dollars to 8 Republican senators. GOP leader Toon just made 8 of his colleagues rich off taxpayer money. At the end of the day, this isn't just about a hidden clause. Like, they probably throw these hidden things all over the place and make billions of dollars off of taxpayers directly into their pockets. But it's essentially about a party rotting from the inside. When senators write checks to themselves and call it governance, democracy becomes a punchline. The question now is simple. Will voters actually finally make them pay it back and vote these people out of office if we ever have that chance? Or will they continue to let these blatant, corrupt actions take the spotlight? These senators, these congressmen, the president himself can just do completely blatantly self-serving things at the behest of the American people. And for what? When are they finally going to actually face accountability? When are we finally going to actually see these faces behind bars for the hundreds of thousands, the millions, the billions of dollars that they have stolen from Americans?